Another wild trade proposal involving the Phoenix Suns, this time putting the Suns in a 4-team deal. That is crazy. We do not see those kind of trades in the NBA. This one moving a series of players around, including a trio coming back to the Phoenix Suns involving the Sun star Bradley Beal. We are going to break that all down for you guys and what this could mean if this crazy trade were to actually become reality right here on Suns Digest. My name is CJ Pierre. Thanks for joining us. Before we get into this crazy trade proposal being put out there by one of the highly rated sporting mediums out there, before we get into that, we noticed that about 82% of you guys are watching our videos, and we appreciate that, but you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet. If you want to keep up to date with all the latest Suns news, updates, and rumors, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Now, this is kind of a dead time right now during the NBA season. We're waiting for the Suns to get into training camp. We can talk about basketball, but who doesn't love a good bout of trade speculation? We have been talking about the Suns and possibly making trades over the course of the entire offseason. It looked like they decided to keep the big three intact with Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and they are going to move forward in a win now season. But that doesn't mean that things couldn't change over the course of the season, and the Bleacher Report is looking into the possibility of the Suns being involved in a 4-team trade, in this particular trade proposal involving Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal kind of had a disappointing season last year with the Suns, disappointing showing in the playoff sweep against the Minnesota Timberwolves, dealt with some injuries, didn't seem like he was really finding the chemistry and fitting in. The hope is that this upcoming season with new head coach Mike Budenholzer, he'll be able to get Bradley Beal involved more so in the offense. Beal only averaging about 18 points per game, well under what was kind of expected of him. He's been a 20-plus point scorer for the majority of his career, and just kind of having this fall back down with Phoenix was not necessarily what we expected when they made the big trade for Bradley Beal. But Bleacher Report now looking at the potential of what the Suns could do with Bradley Beal and his $50+ million contract. Now, they broke down a trade idea that would help both the Bulls and Suns deal overpaid stars. That's according to Bleacher Report reporter Greg Schwartz. Two of those stars being Phoenix Suns Bradley Beal and Chicago Bulls Zach LaVine. Both Zach LaVine on the Bulls, a team that looks like they might be ready to rebuild and have been rumored to be shopping his contract. And then of course the Suns have Bradley Beal with his $50+ million contract. Now, here is this wild 4-team trade proposal, and we'll kind of talk about what the Suns end up giving up in this trade proposal. Then we'll get into what they would possibly get back in this trade involving the Phoenix Suns, Chicago Bulls, but also including the LA Clippers and the San Antonio Spurs. Here's the breakdown. Bradley Beal and the Suns' 2031 first round pick would go to the Los Angeles Clippers. Also included in that will be a 2025 second round pick that would come from the Sacramento Kings. I'm not exactly sure which team currently has that pick, but then the Clippers would also get the 2028 second round pick from the Chicago Bulls. The San Antonio Spurs would receive Zach LaVine from the Chicago Bulls, as well as a 2029 first round pick unprotected from the Chicago Bulls. The Suns would receive Norman Powell from the Clippers, Zach Collins from the Spurs, and as well as PJ Tucker, also from the Clippers. The Bulls would get Keldon Johnson from the Spurs, Terrence Mann, Bones Highland, and Amir Coffey, all who are currently with the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, again, it's a lot to break down there. We're not gonna necessarily dive into all the particulars and go into that, but at the end of the day, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players involved in this potential trade, hypothetical, if you will, coming from Bleacher Report. Now, the interesting thing is that we want to break down into is, does this trade make sense for the Suns? Is this something that the Suns would actually want to look into? Is this something that they should really, consider? And Greg makes an argument as far as why the Suns should look into the possibility of trading Bradley Beal and getting involved in this, again, hypothetical 3-team trade scenario. Let's just talk about it. This is what he says. He says the Suns can get deeper and could escape the second apron next season by swapping Beal for those 3 players, Norman Powell, Zach Collins, and PJ Tucker. Phoenix will save $15.2 million in cap space next summer when the team is projecting to be 16 million over the second luxury tax line. Some minor roster maneuvering could get the Suns below the second apron, even with Durant and Booker still under contract. Now, that actually seems a little bit enticing. The NBA's new collective bargaining agreement and putting teams in the second apron, we've seen exactly how it can really handicap teams in terms of what they're only able to do, making signing players in the veteran minimum, not being able to aggregate multiple players together. And, it really kind of limits your ability to be flexible and improve your team outside of re-signing your own guys and drafting players. And given the situation that the Phoenix Suns are in, where they were already going into the season with very limited draft capital, they don't necessarily have a lot of options to get themselves back under the cap until a lot of these big signee players with large contracts are going to come off their books. That's part of the reason why they made the move to waive Nasir Little, who was going to count over 6 million against their cap this year, and they decided they're going to have to eat some of that money and break that off over the remainder of his contract because he was an untradeable commodity at that point. So there's some logic to that in terms of doing what you can to make yourself maneuverable via cap space. Also, granted, you take a look at what the Suns are giving up. They're giving up the 2031 first round pick way off into the future, 7 years from now. And then there's Bradley Beal, who disappointed in his first year with Phoenix. And then you're getting back guys like Norman Powell, Zach Collins, guys who have been solid role players in the NBA and could contribute to a winning team. Norman Powell is a microwave scorer. We're going to break down exactly what the Suns get back in a minute. And then there's PJ Tucker, the story of him returning to Phoenix as well. So I'm not, the best in terms of, divulging all the cap stuff and figuring out exactly what the collective bargain agreement says and the second apron rules and how it factors into this trade and four-team trades. I can only break it down to his basics, right? So I went to Fanspo. I put this trade in there. They put all that stuff in there. Second apron, collective bargaining, figured in. I put this trade in there, obviously without the picks, just the players. And they say it works. They say you put in Norman Powell, Zach Collins, PJ Tucker to the Suns, Bradley Beal to the Clippers, Levine to the Spurs, and all those other guys to the Bulls. Fanspo says it can do it. It's a success money wise, collective bargaining agreement route wise. It is a possible trade. This is not on me. I didn't go in there and break it down word for word, read down the last minutia. I'm having a computer do it for me. I'm gonna admit it right off the bat. But they say that this trade would be possible money wise. Obviously, the picks would determine whether or not one team accepts it or not. And it seems pretty even across the board. According to Fanspo's numbers, the only difference is the Bulls would actually maybe get a win better, and then the Spurs would maybe get one win worse. You take a look at the teams that eventually would happen. You team Bradley Beal up with Kawhi Leonard, Zach LaVine teaming up with Victor Wembanyama and Chris Paul. That could be an interesting thing with the Spurs. Then obviously the Bulls would continue their rebuild with a bunch of one-year contracts, guys expiring contracts, and then Keldon Johnson being maybe the new focal point of what Chicago tries to put together. But, let's talk about this, again, this hypothetical trade. Let's talk about what this could look like for the Suns. And let's look at the players that the Suns would get back in this trade and how they may fit into this lineup that would only see the Suns only lose Bradley Beal and that 2031 first round pick, excuse me. Now, let's take a look player by player and just kind of see where it all would fit together. Let's start with who I think is the biggest name in terms of this trade of who the Suns will get back. That would be Norman Powell, kind of an NBA veteran. He's been around the block. Always a contender for six man of the year. Last season, Norman Powell averaging close to 14 points per game, 2.6 rebounds, 1.1 assists. But he's a scorer. That's what he does. Shooting 48% from the field, 43% from 3-point range, and over 54% on corner threes. That is huge. Norman Powell is someone who, is a green light to shoot at any point in time. He would kind of be put in a very interesting situation where I think that if this trade were to happen, Bradley Beal leaves, goes to the Clippers. They bring in these three players. I think Norman Powell slides into that six-man role. Coming off the bench, Grayson Allen starts with Tyus Jones, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Yusuf Nurkic. Norman Powell becomes that score off the bench, kind of what Eric Gordon was last season. But I feel like Norman Powell, he's definitely more effective in this role. He's actually a better defender than Eric Gordon as well. So I think Norman Powell in this particular uh, envision of this Phoenix Suns team, given this mock trade, I think Norman Powell would be a pretty good fit. Let's move on and let's talk about Zach Collins. Zach Collins is, a reserve big man who really high energy guy and actually does have some offensive game to him and is able to like move about around the rim. He would probably be, the scoring big man that can come off the bench as well. Last season with the Spurs, averaging 11.2 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, and shooting 48% from the field. His 3-point shot is to be desired. He's not necessarily a knockdown shooter from the perimeter, but he can hit it from time to time. And I think that that would be a beneficial role to have coming off the bench as well. Now, where it kind of gets a little hectic is that you get a little bit of a logjam, particularly with the Suns' front court players. You'd have Kevin Durant, Yusuf Nurkic, in this case, Zach Collins, Mason Plumlee, and then Royce O'Neal, also in that reserve role, who, normally plays, kind of a 3-4 situation. Royce O'Neal does. That also, pushes back also Iguodaro. How does it impact Ryan Dunn as well, with the Norman Powell edition? That kind of gets a little tricky as well. And then that, not to mention the third piece in this particular hypothetical trade, and that's PJ Tucker. Now, last year, PJ not necessarily the main man that he had been in previous playoff stints, only scoring 1.7 points per game, 2.7 rebounds during his last year with the Clippers. Minimal playing time. He would probably be looked at as more of a veteran presence on the bench, not necessarily someone who would take up minutes, but someone who could be there and really impact the locker room, be a locker room leader, former champion, PJ Tucker as well. And then, a return trip to Phoenix. Phoenix was his first stop after he had had his rookie season in the NBA. Then he played overseas for a few years and then came back and signed with the Phoenix Suns to rekindle that fire in the NBA and really became a very highly rated defensive player. He's definitely not the same player that he used to be anymore. He's been in the league for years, but it's definitely something that the Phoenix Suns may want to consider potentially. But I think if you take a look at the three players that the Suns get back in this trade, there are ways to integrate them. However, I don't think it is a move that the Suns are going to do or would want to do. I think the Suns are committed to their big three, wanting to support them as much as possible. They built pieces around them with veteran minimum signings, and I think they have faith in their rookies, Ryan Dunn, also Iguodaro. Those are the players who I think this particular trade would probably hurt the most, is because you wouldn't find any spot place for them in this potential rotation. Right now, there are spots for them. You could see Ryan Dunn and also Iguodaro getting minutes, potentially significant minutes, late in the season, especially if there are injuries. But if you make this three-team trade, you build up that depth. Losing Beal, you add these three players who at the very least of this would fit into the rotation probably automatically. You're pushing that back for Ryan Dunn and also Iguodaro. That would make them primarily Valley Suns players in the G League, and then you don't really see how they would gel mesh with this particular unit. Also, you're losing Bradley Beal. You're losing a very high level scorer, replacing him with Norman Powell, Zach Collins, most likely moving Grayson Allen into a starting role, which I don't really necessarily think that's his best positioning on this team as well. Personally, I take a look at this trade. While I get the cap ramifications of it, I think that there are better options for the Suns with the roster as it currently stands than trading away Bradley Beal. And then on top of that, I haven't even mentioned in this video, Bradley Beal to the Clippers. He'd have to waive his no trade clause. That is the big elephant in the room when it comes to any trade involving Bradley Beal, is that he has to be okay with it. Now, a trade where that would land him with the Clippers, teaming up with Kawhi Leonard, might be enticing, but the Clippers roster isn't necessarily anything to write home about. I think there's a lot of holes. Particularly with the Clippers right now, especially after trading Paul George or losing Paul George to the Philadelphia 76ers. So I don't even know if that's something Bradley Beal would want to do personally. But so I look at this mock trade. I give it a thumbs down. I say no. Despite the fact that there are really good cap ramifications for the Suns at the end of the day, if you're in a win now season, you're trying to win now, this isn't the move that you make. But that's just what I think. We want to hear from you guys. Let us know what you guys think about this mock trade proposal that sends Bradley Beal to the Los Angeles Clippers, with the Suns getting back Zach Collins, Norman Powell, and PJ Tucker in return. Let us know in the comments below, and any other topics you would like us to discuss here on Suns Digest. We appreciate all the love and support from you guys. If you want to make sure you're keeping up to date with all the latest Suns news, rumors, and speculation, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. That's all the time I got for you guys. I will catch you guys next time, and go Phoenix Suns.